Should men and women be paid exactly the same in sports? Of course they should be. Well, let's break it down. Historically, participation in sport has been discriminatory, with men being favored far more over women. This is because women have been considered inappropriate for the field of sport. It's just sad, but that's how historically it has been. Wage gap is one of the biggest areas of prejudice. Women remain far behind men when it comes to being paid in sports. So guys, in this video, we're going to break down why this pay gap exists, what are the reasons that justify a pay gap, what are reasons that don't justify a pay gap, and then of course, I'll give you my view on what I believe should be the case. So the argument is simple. जहाँ ज़्यादा पैसा है, वहाँ ज़्यादा payment मिलनी चाहिए. If the men are generating more revenue, they should be paid more. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is differential performance. A lot of people say that men are stronger in physique, they are faster, they run faster, they can perform better than women, of course, and that's why they should be paid more. I think it's bullshit. That's second reason. The third reason is actually representation issues. I feel that women have very weak representation in governance structures, in administrative jobs. Whether you look at a FIFA or a UEFA or IOA or IOC or IPL, ISL, you look at any kind of structures, whether it's global or Indian in nature, the representation of women in these structures, in the admin, is very limited. And they're not able to really represent the sport as much for the women of our country or globally. So these are the three reasons why the gap really exists. But of course, there are strong arguments on why the gap should not exist, right? And one of the big arguments is same pay for the same job. So if I'm a football player and a female football player, we do the same job, we should get the same money. So that's argument number one, why it should not exist. And the second argument is a lot of people believe that the pay gap is because of discrimination. It's nothing to do with the commercial realities. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's actually discrimination against women. And of course, my opinion on that is that should obviously never happen. So these are the two reasons why a lot of people are against this gap, and they say that the payment should be the same for the same job. But there are also some examples where there is no differential. Actually, organizations that have taken the lead in making the pay exactly the same. And of course, the best example that comes to mind is tennis. All 4 Grand Slams, Australian Open, Wimbledon, French Open, US Open, they have made the prize money equal since probably in the mid-2000s, like 2007 or something. The prize money for men and women is exactly the same. And they have led the way in breaking the glass ceiling, so to speak, when it comes to women's sport. But this issue came into light big time in 2019 when the US women's team won the World Cup. And while the men's team wasn't performing as well at all, and yet the men's team was still getting paid much higher. So the women's team actually sued the federation, the US Soccer Federation, and accused them of gender discrimination. So the point is that there are arguments for it, there are arguments against it. But what actually should be the case? So let's talk about 2 areas here. Problem number 1 is actually the commercial reality of sport. And problem number 2 is discrimination. So here's my view on it. When it comes to commercial reality of sport, I genuinely believe that the commerce should dictate the pay. It has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with sport. It has nothing to do with the country. The commerce should dictate the pay. What I mean by this is, let's take an example of a software engineer. If I'm an engineer in a firm and you're an engineer in a firm, we might be paid differently because our outputs might be different. I might be a guy, you might be a guy, right? Same gender, but different pay because my experience could be different, my output could be different, my knowledge could be different, my performance could be different. But at the end of the day, the final performance and the output to the company is where it makes a difference. Now, of course, you might say, but that's really pay grades and so on. But what if I say, if I'm a software engineer in a company which is an old established company generating lots of profits, and you are a software engineer in a company that's a brand new company that cannot really pay too much. So we might still have a pay gap, but still doing the same job. At the end of the day, the commerce dictates the payment. Now, similarly, if I'm a football player in India a male football player, I might be getting paid less than a female cricket player, right? Now, of course, we are in different sports, but it actually has nothing to do with men or women. A women cricketer makes more than a male football player in our country on an average. I'm talking about the national team players. Now, if that is the case, then a football player saying, I'm also playing for India, putting in the similar kind of an effort, putting 15 hours a day, thinking about football, training, playing for my country, representing the country in the same way a female cricketer represents. So, should they be paid the same? Now, let's go one level below. Let's take the example of badminton. Badminton is a great example where PV Sindhu and Saina Nehwal probably make far more than any other men badminton player in our country, just because the commercial realities of those sports really allow for them to make more. So like I said, commercial realities need to dictate what people are paid. Now, rather than making a blanket statement of let's just give everyone the same pay, let's make a deeper conversation around how can we improve the commercial reality of women's sport? How can we make that equitable? If that is equitable, I don't think anyone, or at least most people, will not have a problem in paying same amount of money to anybody who's bringing in the money. If you take the example of a real estate sector, if I'm a female real estate agent and I'm making the same amount of business for the company, I'll get the same amount of money. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about what actually comes out of the sport. What is the output? If a lot of people are watching a particular sport and there's opportunity around it, there is money there, and it's actually gender agnostic. Now, of course, there are cases where there is discrimination, and there are cases where there's discrimination because women's sport doesn't have that appeal, so to speak. And that, to me, needs to be absolutely fixed. Let's take an example. If you think about AIFF, All Indian Football Federation, the Indian FA, the money that goes into the development of youth or grassroots of women's sport, and the money that goes into the men's side, I don't know the numbers, but I'm pretty certain they won't be the same. Now, that to me is discrimination. If you're trying to put some money behind training a new 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or just at the grassroots level, it should be exactly the same, because that's where the seeds have to be grown for women to be able to actually do better in the sport or better in any sport, and then that sport becoming more commercially viable. Now, if we don't invest the same amount of money, or we don't invest equitable amount of opportunity, then that's where discrimination is. The discrimination is not at the top, because that top is actually guided by the fans. The top is guided by the commercial reality. If I'm interested in watching in UFC a women's fight as much as I'm interested in watching the men's fight, the women should be absolutely paid the same. And actually, UFC is also another good example that when Ronda Rousey became so big in the scene, it was like everyone wanted to see women fight. And the pay-per-view that women fighters were generating was almost the same as the men fighters, in some cases even more. And I'm sure that Ronda was getting paid far more than a lot of the men fighters on the roster. So that's about commercial reality. But let's not mix these two things. The commercial reality is driven by fans. The discrimination is driven by the authorities. And the authorities need to stop the discrimination so that there is an opportunity for that commercial reality to grow. So I have friends in the Indian women's football team, and I mean the effort and the love they've put to the game, the amount of time and amount of just sacrifice for not getting paid anything or getting paid like peanuts. It's just so disheartening. It's like I sometimes cry thinking about that. But the issue is that cannot be changed by AIFF. If the people of India are not willing to watch women's football, that can't be changed by the federation. But what can be changed is, let's put some money in the grassroots. Let's put money in the academy. Let's make heroes out of the actual heroes that exist. Let's give our Indian team enough matches to play. Let's give them enough marketing for people to know what they do. Let's give them enough visibility. If all of that happens and still the fans reject their content, then so be it. But the lead up is not happening. So I know this is a controversial topic, and it's very easy to get caught onto the fact that I'm saying that women should not be paid the same. I'm actually saying that they should be treated absolutely equally, and then let the market dynamics define what they should be paid. The bodies cannot define what they can be paid. The market dynamics will define what they can be paid. But at the moment, what's happening is they are not treated equally. And when the men come to the professional level, or when it comes to a point where professionally somebody needs to be paid, the men are paid far more. But once they are treated equally, and then the fans define that men should be paid more, then so be it. And that's the reality of sports. And that's the reality of any company or any business for that matter. So to end this, my opinion is discrimination exists at the developmental level, the youth level, the grassroots level, the marketing level, the opportunity level, the ecosystem level, and that discrimination should go away. And once that goes away, then the market economics will define whether the men and the women should be paid the same. And I accept whatever the market dynamics define, whatever the fans say. If the fans say they should be paid the same, then so be it. And if they believe they should not be paid the same, then so be it as well. Because you can't change how the fans perceive a sport. If they watch it, they watch it. If they don't watch it, they don't watch it. And that's the reality of it. So there you go, guys. This is my view on it. This is a topic that really bothers me a lot. Having a lot of friends who are women athletes, it really bothers me that there's still so much discrimination on the development side for our women athletes, especially in India, but also all across the world. So if you loved this video, consider subscribing to my channel. If you enjoyed it, I will settle for a like. So for any kind of sports content, Indian sports content or sports business content, you can follow my pages. Ciao, guys.